Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to this video. This is part 2 to my video which I made talking about the differences and similarities between ADHD and autism. So that first video was more to outline and explain the DSM criteria. This video is going to be based more on personal experience, also research and talking to other ADHDers and ADHDers and autistic people and friends. There is honestly so much to this topic that I've been having kind of a little mini crisis about how I'm gonna fit everything into one video, and honestly I can't. There are things I'm gonna miss out, but I've tried to pick some of the most valuable things and most distinctive differences and similarities. I could also do a live stream on here with you guys. Let me know if anyone would like me to do a live stream on YouTube. I've never done it. I sometimes go live on TikTok, but yeah. I'm gonna start with some similarities. Both people with ADHD and autism can be known to info dump because both ADHDers and autistics have a tendency to hyperfixate on topics that they really love. Autistic people are known for being able to hold great amounts of knowledge on their special interests, and also ADHDers can hyperfocus on topics that they're really interested about. Hyperfocus is not just your regular focus. We can learn an absurd, to the regular, probably neurotypical person, an absurd amount of information, like a really big amount of information in a really short time about a topic that we really like. And this is something that often brands ADHDers as inconsistent. I was often called inconsistent in school because in some lessons I would just absolutely excel. When I was doing something I liked, I didn't need a lot of time. I could produce something really quickly to a really high standard, and my teachers would be shocked. And then on other things, on subjects I didn't like, I would struggle a lot, and I'd have nowhere near the level of work and detail that I would put into the things that I would be able to hyperfixate on. So this is a similarity in communication. Both ADHDers and autistic people info dump, and this can be seen as, I don't know, a bit odd or weird by your neurotypical person, because sometimes it's like no one asked for the information, but you just feel like giving it. You just feel like telling someone the whole history of Melanie B and Jerry Halliwell's relationship in the Spice Girls because maybe you had a hyperfixation on it one Christmas and you just stayed up for weeks and watched old Spice Girls interviews and dug into every little piece of their life and found out that Jerry actually left the band because she was heartbroken about Mel B getting married. Anyway. And you know, someone may not have asked for this information, but because ADHDers, we have an interest-based nervous system, and I'm going to get onto this in a second, and autistic people, we also struggle with knowing when it's appropriate to say something and what is appropriate to add to the conversation. So we may just add what we want to, what we're interested in. Moving on to the interest-based nervous system. Now, I researched and I couldn't find something that confirms or denies or tells me like how exactly the nervous system in autism is based, but I did find out that ADHDers have an interest-based nervous system. What does this mean? Let me get my notes out. So in ADHD, most usually, if we have more than 2 of these 4 things, we can hyperfocus on something. We need interest, competition or challenge, novelty, and urgency. If less than 2 of these things are hit, whatever topic, whatever thing that is being put in front of us or that we have to learn or study, we're not going to do very well. We have an interest-based nervous system. We don't do well if we don't tick off 2 or more of these things. And I think that is a slight difference between ADHD and autism, because in ADHD, especially inattentive ADHD, the issues with inattention can be really big and really cause big struggles in school, in jobs, in regular relationships. When you have 2 or more of those things, it makes it way easier for us to be engaged and give attention to the certain thing. I feel like for autism, even if just one thing is met, for example, interest, it would prove easier for an autistic person, say maybe who doesn't have ADHD, to put their attention towards one thing. But if you've got an ADHD or someone who's autistic with ADHD, they might not be able to hold their interest to this one thing unless maybe it's their special interest. It is really difficult. There is something that gets in the way of us holding our attention towards a topic when two or more of these are not met. You've got to think of ADHD and autism as cousins, neurological cousins. Now, through my research, I found out that as well as a neurological disorder, autism is also a nervous system disorder. If you are autistic, you are going to have a lot of issues with regulating your nervous system. And what is your nervous system? Your nervous system is the network of nerves that controls bodily functions and allows us to interact with the world around us. It has to do with sensory things, movement, thought, memory, communication. And often the nervous system can be dysregulated in people with ADHD and autism. But for autism, I found out that it is literally a nervous system disorder. I found in general life that both autistics and ADHDers prefer anecdotal communication. We're both quite likely to communicate by, hey, so this terrible thing happened to me, like I was in a car crash and then my dog injured itself, and then the other person will be like, oh no way, that reminds me of the time that I crashed my bike and I broke my leg. Oh my god, no way, I broke my leg once. A lot of autistics and ADHDers will bounce off each other like this, except in regular conversations, people might not communicate in little anecdotes like this. I don't totally know the whys behind everything, but this is another similarity. Another aspect of autism and ADHD that can be similar is sensory seeking and sensitivities. I feel like more overall, a lot of ADHDers can be very sensory seeking because a lot of us are adrenaline junkies. A lot of autistic people can be sensory seeking, but we can also have sensory issues. Now, I talked more about that in my previous video, so if you want to see kind of the statistics about sensory issues in autism and ADHD, you can go back to that one. I'm going to get into some things that are more specifically autism that you don't see in just ADHD. One of the main differences between autism and ADHD is that in autism you have the social communication deficits and differences, and although you may have social communication differences in ADHD as well, the reasons behind this are totally different. With autism, you see a lot of literal thinking. Some of you guys know the story of when I was a bit naughty in school, and so my mom told me that I'm not allowed to talk anymore. And even though she meant don't talk in lessons, because in my report my teacher said I was quite chatty in lessons, I misunderstood that and I took it as don't talk. And then I didn't talk in school, ever. Well, for about a month, until I heard this girl behind me say that I'm mute and that I can't talk. And I was like, actually, that's incorrect. So it's things like that that are very likely occurrences if someone is autistic. And also remember, it is a spectrum and you must hit all the criteria to be diagnosed autistic, but you can also not be autistic and relate to like one or two traits, you know? Like there may be someone out there who's a very literal thinker. There may be a neurotypical out there who's a very literal thinker, but they don't have any of the other symptoms, traits of autism, and that doesn't make them autistic, that just makes them a literal thinker. Next, for the social communication deficits, differences, we have issues with back and forth communication. For me, this has always been hard, especially in phone calls. I get a lot of anxiety about phone calls because I don't know when to speak. I don't know when it's my turn to speak. You might see the trait of interrupting conversations in autism and ADHD. In ADHD, you'll see it because someone with ADHD is impulsive and maybe can't wait their turn, or they just have this burning thing on their mind and they have to say it, otherwise they'll forget it. And they'll be like, oh, sorry. In an autistic person, and in me, you'll see this double, okay? In an autistic person, they might interrupt and speak out of turn or at the wrong time because I literally don't know when it's the right time to speak. We struggle with social norms, and a lot of us feel like allistics have been given this secret handbook on how to communicate with others and on social norms and rules, and we just don't have it. Why didn't I get the handbook? I want to get onto echolalia. Now, echolalia is something that both autistic people and people with ADHD might do as a stim, but especially in young autistic kids, you might see someone responding to questions with echolalia I remember watching a video of myself when I was younger, and my dad was asking me a question. He was asking me like, what's my name? What's your dad's name? And I was mouthing, I was just like blank stare, not looking at him, and just mouthing, what's your name? What's your dad's name? Someone might ask a question and the kid will just repeat the question back. So it'll be like, what's your name? What's your name? What's your name? What's your name? Because there's this issue with communication. They don't understand that it's a question and they don't know what they have to answer to that question. So they might just repeat the thing that you've said to them. And this is something you don't see in ADHD. This is the kind of social communication deficits, differences we're talking about. In autism especially, you might have reduced sharing of interests with your peers. And I noticed this when I was about 10, 11, 12, and I kept noticing it as I was growing up and I decided to do something about it. I realized that I barely knew things about my friends and they knew a lot more stuff about me than I did about them. So if you had someone with just ADHD, they might be aware of these social norms. They might ask their friends back and forth questions. But with someone autistic, you're more likely to have a reduced sharing of interests, especially if the autistic person cannot find anything in common with this other person. And if we find that we have nothing in common with someone, we might just choose not to speak to them at all. Next, we have abnormalities in eye contact. For me personally, I feel like it's hard to totally be able to formulate my sentences if I'm constantly giving someone eye contact, like especially if I'm explaining something. I cannot also focus on looking someone in the eye. It feels like an extra task. Sometimes, very rarely, I will do it and it will be like an instinct, I guess because I've trained myself. But yeah, eye contact has always been a difficult thing with me, and abnormalities in eye contact is listed as one of the types of social communication differences in autism. Now, I have heard people with ADHD also say that they struggle with eye contact, although it's not in the diagnostic criteria. But you can imagine, because the ADHD mind is so busy, it's understandable that a person with ADHD might also have like fleeting eye contact. With me, sometimes it's that, and sometimes it's more of a, I cannot look at your eyes right now because I need to formulate this sentence. Okay, now we go into something that is pretty much strictly autism criteria, which is facial expressions. A lot of autistics are known to have a flat affect, so differences in social communication includes body language and facial expressions, and this is not something that's in the diagnostic criteria for ADHD. Although what you might find is that someone with ADHD is overly expressive because of their increased energy, and I'm kind of a mix of the two. In autism, the facial expressions and tone of voice and body language may be atypical. A lot of the time it will seem strange to a neurotypical. A neurotypical will be like, why are you doing that? Why do you have that facial expression when you're talking about that thing? The two things don't match up, and that is very much an autistic experience. And yeah, like I said, in ADHD, the main difference that you might find expression wise is someone with ADHD might be quite outwardly expressive, but I'd say that pretty much applies mainly to hyperactive ADHDers. Something else that ADHDers and autistics may have in common is stimming. In ADHD, stimming happens because of hyperactivity and restlessness in the body, in the brain, excess energy that needs to be used up. But I mean, if you've done some research into autism and ADHD, you might know already that stimming is a thing that pretty much everyone on the planet does. Twirling your hair, bouncing your leg, chewing your nails is stimming. It's a self-stimulating behavior. So you can stim even if you don't have ADHD or autism. But in ADHD and autism, it's more excessive. In ADHD, the stimming gives off this restless, can't sit still vibe, you know? When it gets to an extent that it's like disrupting the person's life and people around them can tell that, you know, this person is doing this thing, but to a way bigger extent, then it becomes the criteria for something like ADHD or autism. Stimming in autism may be more atypical. and less socially acceptable, with the exception of people who have learned to mask very well and mask their stimming, because you know, people can go undiagnosed till they're very old, all their life. So someone who has learned to mask their stims might do something more socially acceptable, like twirling their hair, like biting their nails, but it's about the extent to which this person is doing it to, and when is it happening. Do you find that when you're overwhelmed in a sensory way, you can't stop chewing your nails or bouncing your foot or stimming in a certain way? And like I said, a lot of autistics can have more atypical types of stimming and even harmful types of stimming, such as headbanging, hitting themselves. And the stims might be more harmful when someone is in a state of distress, sensory distress, that nervous system is super dysregulated. And if we're reaching kind of a meltdown point, we might kind of lose control of being able to like regulate our stimming and make it socially acceptable, because we're kind of in fight or flight mode. And so in that moment, your body is just trying to kind of save you from the overwhelm that's happening. For me, when I was younger, I also had a lot of vocal stims. I would shriek like, but it would be like really loud and really high, and that was definitely one that's like not very socially acceptable. My parents would always call me out on that. Sorry for the change of scenery. I'm in this cupboard sort of room at my boyfriend's house, and I can't film with other people around, so he just got out the shower, so I thought obviously I moved to a different room to finish filming this video. So yeah, my stimming tends to be more harmful when I am emotionally distressed, because I find that I cannot control the way my stims are coming out. I also had issues with self-harm for many years. I've been like self-harm free for like a couple of years now, and if I am in a position where I'm emotionally distressed and I stim in a harmful way, I don't count that towards like self-harm. I wouldn't say like I've lost my streak, I self-harmed, because it's just a stim and it's not really my conscious decision what that stim is. So yeah, I don't know, I just wanted to add that little bit in there, because sometimes I felt like, like, does this mean that I've given in? It's like, I haven't, because I have way less control over stims than I do to like a conscious decision to self-harm, and it wasn't my intention. And while I'm stimming, it's not my intention to harm myself. My intention is to actually calm myself down. Next we have insistence on sameness and rigidity. This is something that is an autism trait. It is in the second part of the autism criteria, and stimming kind of goes into it because it's like stereotype repetitive movement. Also special interests go into it because it's insistence on sameness. If you have someone who is just autistic and you have someone who just has ADHD, you will usually find that they have a big contrast in this area, because an autistic person will usually have this tendency to like sameness and repetitiveness, and an ADHDer will have a hatred for that. And clearly I relate to both, but I more so have related with the ADHD side growing up, because I cannot stand too much repetitiveness. I cannot stand too much boredom. I need exciting things. I need novelty. In someone who is autistic, a disruption to their routine is usually quite a big issue. For me, a disruption to a routine can be something that causes a lot of dysregulation in the nervous system, and definitely can lead to a meltdown later on, because as soon as something within the autism meter, as I've called it in other videos, as soon as something is disrupted, like everything else will go up. My sensory issues will go up, my social battery will go down, and that's kind of what made me realize I'm autistic. Whereas if you have someone with just ADHD, they don't have much trouble with change. Someone with just ADHD will usually be quite a malleable person, and I do find that at times I am malleable when I've kind of mentally prepared myself for changes that could happen. Generally, autistic people are known to be more rigid, fixated, whereas people with ADHD tend to be more experimental and free. And then you have both of them. You have a mix-up of those. Or you may find that your own ADHD and craving novelty and sensory seeking can actually do damage to the autistic side, which just needs some sameness and calm. And it can even be the other way around, where you're satisfying the autism side, but the ADHD side is getting so bored that you're going crazy. You're going crazy. So that's kind of how it feels when you have both. Something that I found in my life and that other people who helped make this video also told me is correcting people for autism. My whole life people have been mad at me and called me a smart ass and been mad when I have corrected them, because I tend to correct people when they get facts wrong and when I know something, because like, why would you want to carry on with like this incorrect fact, be carrying that around? Let me just tell you what it actually is. And I don't know, I find that holistics find that rude. I've had friendships that have been totally broken down because of me correcting the other person or even answering questions. I've been told that I answer too many questions that I shouldn't, and it's like, it's a question, it's there to be answered. But again, this can happen because of not understanding rhetorical questions, not understanding sarcasm, and yeah, I guess the social communication issues. I cannot figure out which questions are meant to be answered and not meant to be answered unless it's like really obvious, like really obvious. So if you're autistic, you might have been similarly told off for correcting people or being a smart ass. And one final thing, even though it is not the last thing, and there is so much more to say on this topic, but one thing that is quite different in autism and ADHD is autistic people generally tend to be very attentive to detail. People with ADHD, and I'm talking again just autism, just ADHD, people with ADHD tend to be more of a whole picture kind of person. Me being ADHD, I find that when I'm engaging in my special interest, I am extremely focused on detail. When I'm engaging in kind of other things that are not as engaging for my mind, if I'm doing something other than my special interest or hyperfixation, I will focus more in the big picture. A lot of you guys will know that I was a dancer and I have a very bad pickup, except whenever I have been in a dance class, I've always been praised for my attention to detail. And even if I have not been able to pick up the dance because I have terrible memory, terrible pickup, I have still been able to pick up tiny details that sometimes no one would remember. I remember so many times that I literally was not able to do the whole dance, but I was able to pick out the details that no one else would remember. I guess this kind of shows you how ADHD can manifest in someone. I am a whole picture kind of person, but I'm also a detail kind of person. So yeah, if you're wondering whether you're either or, think about this. Are you more whole picture oriented, or are you very much a details person? But again, this, like everything I said in this video, was not an exhaustive list of autistic experiences and ADHD experiences and ADHD experiences. I just thought I had to do a part 2 because I felt like I didn't expand enough on a lot of things that I mentioned in the first video. I hope this was helpful to someone. I hope this video was not too scattered. And also, may I say, for those of you that watched my first video and heard me talk about my little sister who was done dirty by the NHS because she was supposed to have an ADHD assessment, and then when it came around to it, the assessors contacted her school and her school said that she doesn't need an ADHD assessment because they don't think there's a problem, and so they dropped it, and now she's not eligible for an assessment through the NHS. I have actually made a GoFundMe for her, which I'm gonna link in the description and also put in the comments, and I'll be so grateful if you could share this GoFundMe with anyone who you think might be able to donate. I really want to be able to do this for my little sister, to pay for her for a private assessment, because she deserves the help in school and I do not want her to struggle the way that I did. So I'll be so grateful if you take some time to read that, share it. You absolutely don't need to donate if you don't have the money to donate, but if you can, we would both be so grateful. So yeah, thanks for watching this video. Let me know if you're autistic or ADHD and you have like extra points you want to add to this video or things you want to talk about in the comments, let me know and we can discuss this stuff in the comments, because it is my special interest. People in general are my special interest, and psychology and autism and ADHD. Everything that goes into psychology and brains and people. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Subscribe to this channel for more autism and ADHD and mental health content.